Woohoo! The best in the world. The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star. Here for Relationship Rhombus, which means I'm not alone, which means the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy is here with me. Stephanie, welcome to the show as always.
Oh, yeah. I love Relationship Rhombus. I was looking forward to this one since the last one.
Absolutely. Now, I got to tell you, so this is something Sovryn Tech, actually in the past few weeks, not just a couple, in the past few weeks, Sovryn Tech has gone up another couple thousand listeners. So we're like kissing 13,000 listeners per week if this keeps up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are we getting herpes from that?
Hopefully not. You don't want to spread any CPV or anything along those lines, But anyway, point being is that I feel like Sovryn Tech is really like growing beyond perhaps what could be considered its humble origins, though I dare say they were not so humble.
But you humble.
Not with me at the helm. But that's the thing is that, I think this is, it's been going places for a long time, but it's getting there, to that stage. And because of that, I don't, and this is something I've talked about for years. I don't need to be the only guy, I don't need to be the only person, kind of running the show or on board with everything. So why, why should I be? And so what I want to do is I want to start bringing on full on co-hosts, that really, I've bragged enough over the years that I do this show on my own, 2 hours a week, every week, 6 years, nonstop, and I could do it for another 6, no problem. I've got all the energy in the world and well, I don't have all the time in the world, unfortunately, but I've got all the energy in the world and I can make it happen. But yeah, I want to bring people on as like full on, or not full on, not like every episode, but official co-hosts. And I think that that'd be really cool. And obviously the first person that I would consider a full on titled co-host, of course, would be the show's producer, that being the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy.
Yes.
Woo, yeah.
I was hoping I would be the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I've been helping out with Sovryn Tech from the very beginning, and I was proud to be called the producer for the first, 5 or 6 years of the show, however long it was.
Yeah.
I think we started in, 2011 or something? Like, when did we start?
2012.
2012. Okay,
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a while that I've been involved with the show, and it's your show. You started it. It's your project, so you can never be not the main person because then it wouldn't be your show anymore. But I like the idea of co-hosts, and I'm super proud to be the first one. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on up in the world. I got a promotion.
Yeah, you
for
did.
My free job.
I might get you we'll get you an email address, at sovryntech.com. We'll get you the whole thing. Oh yeah, I
fringe benefits.
Sure, I plan on a lot of these. And there are going to be more people as well. That will be coming on. It's going to be a select few. It'll be, in fact, Sovryn Tech listeners, they already came up with a name for this sort of thing. They call it the Sovryn Tech Cabal. Pretty much any of the women that have been involved with the show and whatever. That's what they call them. And so, yeah, so the Cabal is getting a little more official now. And this is something I talked about around like episode 100 or before episode 100. And how many years ago was that? Now we're at like episode 260 something, almost episode 270. Where I said that, I'd like it to get to the point, especially at that time when I was kind of a bigger fan of the Twit network. I said, I'd love to get to the point where Sovryn Tech is more like This Week in Tech, where, Leah Laporte is just kind of like wrangling everybody kind of in and leading everything off and whatever. But he has guests on, he has co-hosts on and whatever that talk about the topics of the week with him. Now, the format of Sovryn Tech isn't going to change. There's still going to be segments. There's still going to be, none of that's changing. But yeah, now there's official full-on co-hosts that they can say and they can go and tell people. Look, when you get above 10,000 listeners, that's when advertisers start taking you very, very seriously. Not saying you can't get them before then, but that's when they start taking you very seriously. That's when suddenly Audible's knocking at your door saying, hey, you want to have Audible be a sponsor now that you have 10,000 listeners? That's kind of a breaking point. And I think it's a point where honestly, you can go to people. And if you want to, you can say, yeah, I'm a co-host on this, very popular or this popular podcast. So I just want to make it official. And I think that I think it's pretty cool. And I've got other.
I think it's pretty cool too.
Yeah,
I'm a Sovryn Tech co-host.
That's right, the real deal. So, and like I said, there'll be more. And I'm really excited about it. And there's already one other person that I've reached out to about this so far. And anyway, we'll see how everything goes. So, and this is going to bleed into Patreon and everything else. And I think it's all going to be very exciting. 2018 is going to be an amazing year, and this is stuff that I've been prepping throughout January, along with other things that's just going to be really cool. So, okay, getting that out of the way. Thank you, Stephanie, of course, for accepting. And
I wouldn't say no.
Yeah. I mean, the shape it will take at least once a month. I think you'll be on, and we'll figure out where it goes from there. And also, I mean, it could be, well, again, we'll see how it goes. But you're full on co-host.
Yay! The Sovryn universe grows.
It's growing always.
Sovryn family.
Now the other part that I want to discuss quickly is social media. And I suppose I should have been doing a lot of this during a Q&A, but what the hell? We got the Relationship Rhombus Show here. Let's do this. It's
kind of like a Q&A.
Yeah. So I've, for this episode, I fielded the questions via Patreon. I said, it was like, okay, look, there's a Relationship Rhombus Show getting recorded for this month, because there's always one every month. If you want to get your question in, you can message me on Patreon, or you can comment under the actual Patreon post for that month, in this case for January. I'm really not. Yeah, I'm still on Twitter. I can't, like I said, that's kind of the phone book of the internet. I don't see myself really leaving that ever, and I never have. That's kind of the one I've been always very consistent on. And of course I'm on Patreon, and I mean, personally, I might share shit on Instagram or something like that, but, yeah, I'm really backpedaling off of social media, and honestly, I don't think the show needs it. Me having a presence on social media, I don't know, has done anything to help the show whatsoever. And it's not
really.
I don't
really
think so. I don't think it's helped.
Okay, well, maybe this is talking shop too much, but I disagree. I mean, I saw you make a concerted push for social media promoting your show, and you did gain a lot of influence over the past several years. I mean, it took a couple of years doing that, but when you were blogging daily, I mean, that got you listeners.
Yeah, but that got me listeners those weren't, and I could see where the links were coming from. My website could get hundreds or thousands of hits a day. They were not coming from Facebook, I mean, and I don't think they were really coming from Twitter either. They were coming from Google searches and whatever other searches that had
Google
to do
search.
with it.
Okay.
So yeah, here's the thing, is that I know the listeners that have reached out to me, and that I've kind of looked into, maybe because I'll see that they have their Twitter handle and their Patreon or something like that. Or however it works. The listeners that have reached out to me, I know they're not in my Facebook list. They're just not. So that's my point, is that reaching out via Facebook to the Liberty Movement has meant jack shit. It hasn't done anything.
You're post Liberty Movement anyway.
Well, that's the term I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I mean, and I think Sovryn Tech really is. I mean, because I don't even think most of my audience would identify with the term capitalism, Right. I mean, a lot of them would, but not most. And that's fine. I don't mind that, and I don't mind that there's capitalists that identify with the show or that listen to the show. Come one, come all. Okay.
Sovryn Tech is bigger than that.
Yeah. So I'm not, because I've tried over the years, and I'm bringing this up because, and it's kind of related to relationships. I've tried over the years, I tried quitter.no. I've tried all these different, any new thing that would crop up over the past 5 years, because the past 5-6 years has been a very exciting time for tech. Now that exciting time for tech has nosedived. It's not exciting anymore. Everything's kind of, getting into which I predicted years ago, everything's going back to a closed garden. We're going back to the days of AOL. I'm not going to push hard for any platform. I'm just not. Patreon's there, but that's because Patreon offers the content and is a money transmitter, blah, blah, blah. It works along those lines. So obviously they can't go anywhere. But just to make it clear with everybody, I'm not going to push for any kind of social media. I'm not going to push for any kind of platform anymore. I'm not interested. I'm not going to try to even get people on board. You want to be on board with the show? Listen to the show, and you want to be really on board with the show, then you can be on Patreon. Again, Patreon's not just some free platform. This is where I make, bread and butter to some degree of what the show can be.
You're not the product on Patreon.
Right, exactly.
Well, I guess maybe you are the product, but at least you're selling yourself to people. It's not someone's pimping you out.
Yeah,
to
at least I'm getting paid too. You know what I mean? So I just want to make that clear with everybody. I am, maybe in the past couple months, I might have pushed for a couple other things, but look, this is it flat out. I am not making any push for any other platform. And I'm never going to, and well, you never want to say never, but as it stands right now, I'm not going to push for any other platforms. If I had my way, a question we get a lot into the Relationship Rhombus Show is, how do I find love? I'll tell you how. Get the fuck off of social media and get out there and like meet real people and like physical people, like that, or at least that's one piece of advice. Not saying people don't find love on social media. Certainly they do. But there you go. So I'm just, if you want to just get off of social media, entirely. Stephanie, talk for a minute, if you would.
Sometimes I was just thinking, sometimes I feel like the Robin Quivers to your Howard Stern.
That is one of the nicest things. I love Robin.
I always loved Robin.
Yeah, she was the best part.
She actually inspired me to kind of get into radio.
She had such a great voice.
Amazing voice. Yep. Yeah. And she was always like, you could tell she was really smart, but she was letting people underestimate her and just think that she, was whatever, just the color gal or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying colored like,
I mean,
she's black,
but right.
But like color commentary. That's what I meant. Like it's like a wrestling term when they say I'm the color guy.
Right.
They like provide
color commentator.
Commentator. Yes. Anyway.
Yeah.
So she let people underestimate her, but I think she was always like really smart and she totally knew what was up. And she wasn't going to she didn't let Howard give her shit either, Oh,
yeah. She would tell Howard, she would say, no, Howard.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's why he liked her because she actually stood up to him.
Yeah. She wasn't a yes woman. Which is great. And honestly, yeah, I think Robin's fantastic and probably, she's probably so fucking wealthy,
I really hope so.
And I don't think most people even know who she is, but she's got to be sitting really pretty.
Good for her.
And that's what I say. Yeah. Hell yes.
Just sit on that pile of cash and take a vacation.
Right on.
You deserve it.
Yeah.
Cheers to you, Robin.
That's right. Yeah, but that's a fair analogy. I don't mind that, And Howard Stern, I have had people orgasm on my show, so
and I call you out for shit like that.
I have. All right. Hell, well, never mind. Okay, so Stephanie,
yes,
love of my life,
yes.
Why don't we get into those are the 2 points I wanted to bring up was about the co-hosts. Full-on co-hosts and the social media aspect.
Well, shit, can we get to the relationship questions
Let's get
already?
to the questions. Exactly. Let's do this. And I've shortened them down because sometimes
you have to do that.
Yeah, right. You do because I think a lot of time if we have our way, one of them's actually going to be an article that somebody sent in. And so I want to make sure there's time for that because I thought it was a very interesting article. But also, like, these shows don't need to run into, sometimes they run for like 2 hours, you know what I mean? And they don't need to necessarily go that long. So I've pared these down to like kind of the bare essentials, and none of them were really like telling a story. They were pretty simple questions anyway. But I do want to update something. And that was, we were asked a few Relationship Rhombus episodes ago, which we've only done like 6 or 7 of these so far, because they happen once a month, was about what's like good music to listen to while you fuck.
I remember that question. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found, man, did I find some amazing music. And I'm going to tell a quick story. So what inspired this was, well, in fact, it might be relative to a question that comes up later on if we get to it. We went to one of our favorite places, which is a place that has Japanese hot tubs.
Ah, yes,
where you get to
place.
Enjoy them.
Yeah, it's a spa.
It's a spa.
Japanese style baths. You rent them by the hour or the half hour.
Yeah.
And you get a little private room with a wooden tub with water that's been purified by ozone.
Right.
And a little shower in there. And you get towels, and they can pipe in music into those rooms, in the indoor rooms at least.
Exactly.
Because they have rooftop ones, but then they also have indoor ones. The indoor ones have speakers where you can pipe music in, so they ask you, what do you want to listen to?
Right. Now, we went to this a couple weekends ago, and took a Sunday and, turned it into a Sunday drive. It was wonderful. I took you out for it. And the dinner wasn't as great as we were hoping. We tried someplace new, and that was a mistake.
Yeah.
But and it was Mexican. How do you fuck up Mexican?
By nickel and diming your customers.
Yeah, I guess. So anyway, we do this, and we usually get the outdoor room, but it was like negative something. It was like -2 or something outside. And apparently that's very popular.
January here.
Right. This is January, in the Northeast.
The place is in Massachusetts.
Right. So apparently this is actually very popular for people to, I don't know if they're all practicing the Wim Hof method or what the hell's going on for them.
It was crowded. We got there and there were just a line of hippies out the door just waiting to get warm in the hot tubs.
Right. So normally you have to reserve for this place. And so I reserved, I got what we could, because we decided somewhat short notice to do it. And we ended up having to get an indoor hot tub, which is fine. We've done that a couple times. I think when we've had friends go with us and everything. And it's been nice. And in the indoor ones, they say, well, here, would you like to choose some music? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. Sometimes I think when we've done it before, we just didn't have any music, but I went looking through and there were some interesting choices. They have like this whole, binder book where you can choose through all the music and everything. They had some Sigur Rós there. Maybe I would have gone with that. I'm a big fan of Sigur Rós. And there's a bunch of some poppy stuff. Like a pretty broad selection. It wasn't any Ozzy Osbourne or Kiss or anything, but there's a lot there. And one of them was, like, it just said Tantric meditation something. And I was like, oh, wow.
So of course, Brian was intrigued by this and he had to try it.
I was like, well, if I'm going to choose something, let's go with that, and they played it. And not that we even like really heard it so much.
It was hard to hear over the bubbling,
especially when you
of
got the bubbles
tub.
going. Yeah. But when we turn it off, you could definitely hear it more. Mm-hmm. But I was listening to it, I was like, that's pretty good. It's just this pure instrumental, whatever.
It had some sitar in there, I would say, just to make it sound nice and tantric.
Right. And today I said to myself, I was like, you know what? I wonder if I could find like an album with all that shit. And with stuff on there. And I couldn't exactly, there's albums, but I wanted to like kind of try it before I buy, if you know what I mean, Pirate Bay. And I couldn't really get my hands on anything. So then I just went to YouTube and I typed in tantric music. And tons of shit came up.
I'm sure it did.
And it was all great.
Wow.
And I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh yeah, play this in the background and you can fuck to this. You either slow or whatever pace you're thinking about.
That's kind of what it's for.
Yeah, you could make it happen. And it's hot. I loved it. And so I am updating my recommendation to say,
oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. Now here's the rub. Ready? Here's a suggestion. This is more of my anti kind of smartphone bent that I've been on lately. Unless you have YouTube Red, do not play this on your YouTube app. Maybe
these ads will come up.
Yes, because they'll be like these hour-long mixes.
A good time like an ad.
Yep, and then the ad will pop up, and then it's over. Now, if you're running an ad blocker like uBlock Origin on Firefox or something, I think in mobile it might even solve it too. But certainly on desktop, you can pull that off. But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to do, and this is I've done this to Stephanie a couple times, where like she'll just walk into the bedroom and say like there's been points where I've had my my desktop would be in the bedroom, my desktop computer. And I have this really wide widescreen monitor, like super wide. And I'd go on YouTube and I'd put on a flame video, or a fireplace video.
Oh, yeah.
And just have like the fireplace.
That was really nice.
Yeah. Obviously you're not feeling anything, but like, it's sweet, right? It's like, oh, isn't that nice? And it makes
it changes the atmosphere. It really does.
Yeah. And it's something like that people I don't think generally expect. So if you're listening to this, you want to entertain a guy or gal, whatever, maybe mute the fireplace video, but then play a tantric music video on YouTube. And I think you would surprise the hell out of whoever, you were wanting to have a good time with.
Just remember your ad blocker. It's like your lube. You can't forget it.
Yeah, this is why ad blockers are so important.
That's
because
right.
It'll keep YouTube from playing their ads in the middle of 9-hour long tantric music. Because it has to be 9 hours long, because it's tantra. Sting and something. Anyway, so there's my recommendation.
Cool,
for
I
that.
like it.
Yeah, right on. All right, so let's get into these questions. Again, some of them are going to be very short. Like these two are very, very short. Is porn addiction real?
Ooh, good question. Porn addiction.
Yeah.
This is a hot topic that's been talked about a lot in recent years.
Yes.
I haven't heard that much about it in like the last 2 years, but I think like 2015 and 2014, I remember hearing a lot about it.
Sure. Well, I think that there's a reason for that, but if you want to give your take as far as do you consider it like a real thing or not, well, there's a reason they asked us.
Okay, so yes, I think that you can get addicted to nearly anything.
Right.
You can, and what defines an addiction versus normal healthy use or perhaps like slightly compulsive use? It's obviously it's going to be kind of a spectrum, but the point at which something becomes an addiction is when you are using it to cope with other things that you don't want to deal with. You are doing it to the detriment of responsibilities that you might have. You are doing it so much or in such a way that it harms you or other people. That's when it starts to cross over the line into becoming an addiction. And This can happen with anything. Internet, right? Like we all use the internet, or most of us use the internet, but if you're on the internet so much that you're forgetting to drink water, or if you're playing video games so much that you're forgetting to drink and you're becoming dehydrated, or you're losing all your friends and all your family because all you want to do is be on the internet or be playing games, like then it's a problem, right? So in order to determine if something is an addiction or not, you have to be willing to be really honest with yourself and critically evaluate like what consequences it's having on your life. You know, another indication of an addiction is that you want to stop. You realize it's hurting you. You want to stop, but you feel you can't stop. You feel it's compulsive. You have to keep doing it, and you're not sure why, and it seems to have this strange power over you where it's very difficult to stop. Right.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the big concern or the real problem is when this stuff gets, you know, like codified and pathologized, where like it's porn addiction, it's video game addiction, it's smartphone addiction. Again, like you said, all of these things can be, you know, comic books. You're never going to hear, I cannot believe that there would ever be such a thing as comic book addiction, but comic book can be as harmful an addiction as anything else. I know, you know, I used to hang out in plenty of comic book shops. There were guys that would go in there, they would spend their entire paychecks.
Oh yeah. That's
on buying
another
comic
thing.
books.
Right.
Obviously that's not healthy for you, you know, and I mean, and it wasn't like, I mean, and they needed the money, they needed to eat, you know, I knew these guys. So yeah, anything can become an addiction. When it starts to pathologize against like specific items, I have very real concerns when people do that sort of thing.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is like the next part of what I was actually thinking too.
Sure.
Which is that a lot of times when there's sort of a setup to categorize something as an addiction, it's a diagnosis that other people are applying to your habits, or it becomes a judgment on you, and it becomes a thing where it's almost like, okay, this person has an addiction, we have to force them to stop. They need help. You know, they need an extreme intervention in which they're forced to stop doing this thing because clearly it's hurting them, and maybe they can't even see that themselves. Or it becomes an excuse to not take responsibility for one's own behavior. Right. For example, I think sex addiction is kind of similar to porn addiction.
We did get asked about that as well, but go ahead.
Okay, so we'll talk about this when it comes out. But the thing is, I think you can get addicted to sex or addicted to picking up strangers and trying to have one-night stands with them, that kind of thing. I think you can get... people can have all kinds of unhealthy kind of sexual behaviors that are compulsive or that are harming them or that they're doing to their detriment or that they're doing at the expense of doing other essential responsibilities and self-care and that kind of thing. But the problem with that, with calling something like that sex addiction, is that then you have suddenly this diagnosis of sex addiction. And the next time somebody cheats on their spouse, the next time somebody looks at porn at work, because they just had an oopsie, you know?
Yeah.
The next time somebody, you know, a teacher sleeps with a student or something inappropriate happens like that, the person can say, oh, yes, I did this thing, but it's not my fault. I'm a sex addict.
Right.
I'm going to get therapy for this. I couldn't help it. I'm a sex addict. I admit that I was wrong and I'm going to get therapy. And it becomes a way to absolve them of responsibility, you know, and also pathologize something that's quite sometimes isn't actually pathological, right? Like the person who cheats on their spouse, you could say, yes, that's wrong. Like it is wrong to be dishonest with your partner. It's morally wrong to mislead your partner in that way or to cheat on them and go against your agreement that you had with your partner or whatever. And it's also unfair to the person you're cheating with sometimes because they don't know about your partner or they think that you're available for a relationship when you're not, blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of ethical issues with cheating, but it's not necessarily like medically pathological. It's not like necessarily something that person is doing at the expense of like drinking water and eating. It's not something the person's necessarily spending their last dime on.
Yeah.
Or going to do instead of work or something like that. Yeah. It's not necessarily rising to the level of something that's so pathological and harmful that it's clearly an addiction, that it fits those criteria that we just talked about a minute ago for what constitutes an addiction. In that sense, you know, calling themselves a sex addict is just kind of an excuse it's a cop-out. It's a way to avoid responsibility.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the problem with a lot of pathologies is that they are based upon their foundation is some kind of agreed upon, and it has to be agreed upon, some kind of agreed upon normalcy that who the fuck agreed to that, you know? And like, for example,
often it's agreed to by experts who have, you know, potentially an agenda, whether that's, you know, being regarded as an expert or whether that's selling pharmaceutical medications that can then be applied to that diagnosis or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because like some people, you know, a question that we haven't gotten asked, but, you know I've read relationship books and stuff like this. And the question that comes up, or at least in those books seems to come up often, is like, how often is how much is too much masturbation? Is it once a day, once a week, twice a day, 3 times a day? You know, how bad is it? Look, everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. Some people have very high sex drives. Some people have very low sex drives. Some people coming 3 times a day for a guy, even, you know, I mean, like, it's no problem. They can do that on the regular. You know,
and it may change over time, over the course of your life, depending on how old you are, what stage of life you're at, and how much free time you have, and other factors.
But some people might use those metrics of how often you masturbate, perhaps, to claim whether or not you're a porn addict or a sex addict.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing is that, in fact, I think before, did you say it during while we were recording, or maybe it was before, but that you hadn't heard anything about porn addiction in like years?
Oh, I did say that on the show. Yeah.
You said that on the show. Right. Okay. So there's the funny thing, is that for a while there was this rash of information that was really popular around 2014, 2015.
Yeah, it seemed to be trending. There was even the NoFap, like there was a hashtag NoFap.
Yeah, exactly.
People were doing porn cleanses where they would reset their brain by not consuming porn for 30 days or something like that.
Yeah, it was a fad. It was almost like a diet. It was a fap fad.
Right, it was a masturbation and porn diet.
Yeah, it was like a diet.
And that's a great analogy because people treat it as a diet, not a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because they would do it for a month, like however long they could last, right? A month, a week, or however long they made it. And then they would go back to their old habits pretty much, maybe a little bit better, but yeah.
Right. Now, I covered this on the show at the time, and I made the point. I said, wait a minute, I've gone to all the links that these people are referencing. These are blog posts. This isn't actual research that anybody's done. Like there is no research, or practically no research to suggest there's theoreticals, hypotheticals of, oh, it's affecting this part of your brain. It's like doing heroin or eating cheese, which, let's be clear here, eating cheese is like chemically equivalent to doing heroin, right? Or I mean, like the addiction.
It's some of the same chemicals are being released.
They're similar reactions,
right? It's not exactly the same.
It's not like, eating cheese is not like being on heroin. So, but
they both release fun brain chemicals that are rewarding, and you know our brains are wired to want more reward and increasingly rewarding rewards.
Right. But the point being is that the evidence barely existed that this was a real thing, but everybody in that time frame was talking about it like this is, this is the second coming of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, or the first coming of them, I guess. Or I don't know if all four of them were coming or what, because maybe they were porn
that
addicted.
Day.
Yeah.
Instead of going to work.
Right.
There was one website I saw that really seemed good and scientific. And it went out of its way to say, like, we are coming from a scientific perspective. This is not a religious thing. This is just, we're trying to present the science. And I wish I could remember the name of it. I think it was Your Brain on Porn, actually.
Okay.
I remember that one being promoted a lot, but some of the NoFap websites and videos and blogs, yes, they did have a clear agenda. It was an overtly religious message.
Yes,
that coming from a religious perspective that believes that masturbation and porn are just inherently wrong, and even would say that things like romance novels that women would read are wrong because that's lusting in your heart, and that's like basically a version of porn that isn't healthy for people.
Right.
So, they would say stuff like that at the extreme end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying about the bunk science, because there was a lot of bunk science mixed in with that.
Yes. So, and you would get a lot of anecdotes from people who would say, well, I stopped jerking off for a month. And then even when a woman just touched me or hugged me, I would suddenly get a boner. And all
so that was a friend of mine that said that. And
well, yeah, but he wasn't the only one. There were other people too. I really didn't mean to reference him.
Yeah, but I think that's a funny story to bring up because, like, without saying who it was, I mean, like, okay, so this person said, I stopped jerking off to porn for 30 days, and then I suddenly noticed I was at the bookstore and a woman, like, brushed up against me, and I felt myself getting a boner.
Right.
Is that really a good thing?
No, that's terrible. That's creepy as fuck.
Right, I know. It's like, okay, maybe you're a little too pent up, right?
Yeah. Now that's just an example. Okay, right. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole opposite end problem. Like there's some real issues going on there, I think.
Dude, maybe you should start jerking off again.
Yeah, big
that's
time.
Happening.
Right. But here's the thing is that, like, no, I'm sure some of those anecdotes were very real. Okay. But that doesn't point that masturbating too much. I mean, like, what is even too much? And this is part of my point is that I'll give you an anecdote, and Stephanie, I'm going to get a little personal. I can edit it out if you want.
Okay.
Okay. Do I ever have, like, you know how many boners I get
throughout the course of a day or a week?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
And how often, I mean, like, let's say I'm ejaculating probably once a day or every other day or something. Like, I mean, I am definitely coming at the levels that the NoFap movement would have said is terrible.
Well,
but
I don't know about that, because they were associating it with porn. And the problem for them, I think, that they were saying was that young gentlemen were having trouble getting aroused by real life partners because they were getting so overstimulated by porn that their brain and their dick was getting to a threshold that no real partner could actually meet. And so some young guys were experiencing erectile dysfunction and weren't able to get it up in real life situations. And you don't have that because you don't watch porn.
Well, okay, but that is wholly different. Like, I get that. All right. But my point is that it is physically possible to come every day and for however many years, even with the same person. Because you and I have been together, 5 years now, and still get a boner, like, all the time, from all kinds of things.
That's really sweet.
Okay. And I'm just saying that, like,
people show their love.
Yeah, well, there it is. But my point in saying that is that it's an individual thing. Like, what one person thinks is coming too much is not the same as it is for somebody else. We're all biologically we're individuals, even biologically.
Yeah, that's completely right. And you could look at a normal range to, like, everybody wants to know that they're normal. I think most people want to know
I want to know I'm abnormal, but yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I feel like an alien all the time.
Yeah, I'm a mutant. Yeah.
But most people want to know that they're normal on various things. And so maybe they might look for a range,
Right.
what is a normal range for masturbation or for sex or for porn watching or whatever. And they might want to see where they fall within that range. I know another thing people want to know, this is, maybe I shouldn't mix these two topics together, but, like, one thing that a lot of people that I learned in medical school that a lot of people ask their doctors is, how often should I be pooping? And
right.
the answer is the normal range is 3 times a day to 3 times a week. Now that's a pretty big range.
That is a broad ass range, pun intended.
Yeah, it is. And I'm sure that the range for sexuality is similarly broad or more broad.
Even more so, I would imagine.
Yeah, because we're all individuals. And so that's why we have to answer these questions for ourselves. This has to be a voluntary thing.
Right.
If you want to undertake a fast or a cleanse to, get your dick wired differently or your pussy wired differently, some women can get oversensitized or
to toys
to vibrators. Yes, that's
yeah.
right. And they have trouble having an orgasm a different way other
Yeah.
than a vibrator, because that stimulation can be so intense. It can get you used to coming that way, and then pretty soon you have trouble coming any other way, and you need a vibrator. So women can go on vibrator diets as well, but it's something that really you are the best judge of. And sometimes it can be hard to see, because we've all had friends and family that are addicted to something, whether it's alcohol or food addiction or their smartphones or the internet or games or whatever. We've all seen people struggle with compulsive behaviors and be using something what we think is too much, and they don't see it themselves. They're having trouble seeing the negative effects that it's having on their life. But ultimately, we have to let people be the judge. There's no better judge than you, because you're the only one who can really change it. You can't force somebody to change,
Right.
All those forced treatment programs, they don't work. Like when somebody gets arrested for marijuana possession or drug possession or alcohol or DUI or something like that, when they get forced into a court-ordered treatment program, nobody wants to work at those programs because they know that they don't work. And it's going to be meaningless because people don't want to be there. They're not going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to change, it's got to be for you, and you got to want it.
Yeah.
It's got to be very intrinsic. And yeah. So here, I guess here's my bottom line with this. And I'm not Stone Cold Steve Austin, but.
And that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line.
Texas rattlesnake.
Yeah. But so you can be addicted to porn. Yes. Just like you can be addicted to almost anything else.
Lots of other things, yeah.
Okay. Not because it's porn. Now, that said, that does not mean that all porn is healthy, all porn is wonderful, all porn is, the act of the great dark Lord. And I mean that in a positive way. Porn does have problems. It can teach you very unhealthy practices and mores of sexuality. Mm-hmm. Okay. Very unhealthy. Like to where rape could be glorified. Lots of other things, could really be held up as like, okay, no, this is what sex looks like. Okay.
Even just unrealistic sex techniques that they have to do to show, like, for example, when you have to show pussy eating done right is not much to look at on camera. But in order to show something on camera, they have to do it in a completely different way.
Right.
And people see that and they think, oh, that's how to eat pussy. Well, actually, no, it's not if you're interested in pleasuring your partner, right?
Right.
That's just one example. Porn can be so problematic, and most of it out there is really problematic.
Yes, it is.
And it's important to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a young person and you don't have much sexual experience.
Yeah. So that's where, if you want to talk about problems with porn, that's what you talk about. Not that people are necessarily addicted to it. That, like what it's putting on display, like you said, can be very problematic. And I've said this before, and I'll say it one more time. One of the best things anybody could do, if you want to, let's say you think you have porn addiction. Let's say you think that porn, or that like you have some kind of problem with porn personally that you got to get over. Find a way. This will cure you, I guarantee you. Find a way to get on a porn set. Oh. It is not what you think. I have been there. I have been on one, and it is one of the most. Not all of them are this way, but then I would say that the porn you're watching isn't unhealthy. But many of them, it is one of the most disturbing things you'll ever see is a porn set. Not because of the amount of sex going on. The sex part's fine. Not exactly, but not what's on camera is fine. It's what's happening on the other side of the camera that is positively disturbing what you'll see. And like, yeah, I mean, consent seems to be out the door on a lot of what's going on. And it's not just about sex. There's lots of drugs and other things that this isn't a drugs are bad kind of thing. I'm not saying that at all. I'd never say that. I am saying that it's very creepy what you'd be looking at, on the other side of that camera.
It's almost like, most people, if they knew how their hamburger was raised, how that cow was treated,
exactly,
they wouldn't want to eat it.
Yes, great analogy.
You got to be an ethical consumer of porn.
Right. Great analogy there.
And there is like feminist porn out there that's made with a wide variety of, races, ages, body types, genders, sexual situations. There's definitely porn out there that caters to the more... and that is ethically produced and that caters to a more diverse kind of idea of what sex looks like.
Yeah.
But that is not the majority of porn that's out there, especially on the free sites like XTube or RedTube or,
right,
like YouPorn or whatever.
Right. Though I am very pleased at, and I talked about this in a recent Q&A episode for Patreon, I'm very pleased that like Pornhub in many ways has almost become YouTube. Meaning that you have Pornhub stars. They're not porn stars. They don't live in Van Nuys. They are stars.
They're so-called amateurs. That
quote unquote amateurs, but they could be dynamite. And they're doing it in their own rooms and all this stuff. I mean, that's becoming a very popular thing.
They might make money from cam shows or things like that.
Yeah, like they could sell videos on other sites and whatever else, but they get like a huge following on Pornhub. Great.
Yeah.
Like that's as consensual as it gets. They are their own directors. They are in complete control. I mean, that's independent entrepreneurship, and I think it's remarkable.
And just like any industry, the internet is changing it. And, we've seen the porn industry radically change over the last couple of decades, for sure. I just wanted to bring up something, like if we're really going to strike the root here, talking about porn addiction and sex addiction, why don't we talk about where all addictions basically come from? Because I think they do share a common cause or common causes. So often when people have addictions, it's a manifestation of trauma that they have not processed or dealt with properly.
Sure.
And they are medicating themselves, pain that they feel. They don't have to feel that pain that they carry around with them when they're engaging in the addiction because it distracts them from it. It gives them a hit of dopamine or whatever, a hit of feel-good brain chemicals that makes them momentarily forget about the pain that they're carrying around.
Right.
And that pain, the thing that they're doing is almost irrelevant. It's not really irrelevant because different behaviors have different consequences. Different addictions have different consequences, but it could be smoking. It could be alcohol. Alcohol is like an emotional anesthetic. It just kind of numbs those feelings right up.
Sure.
Smoking is something to do with your hands. It's something that feels a certain way in your lungs. It distracts you from stuff.
Yeah.
Porn is again something to do with your hands. Perhaps it gives you a hit of dopamine. It gives you rewards.
Right.
Same thing with checking your email and checking your Facebook and all these other. We have so many addictive things that are available to us at all times in this world that it can be challenging to avoid them. But if you are mentally healthy and you have dealt with your past traumas, you are much less likely to fall into the need to use them as a form of medication to forget about uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
So really, if you want to get at the root of any addiction, you got to look to your childhood. You got to look to traumas that you've experienced, maybe not even as a child, but
could be as an adult.
Child traumas tend to be particularly impactful and particularly stick with people because when you're young and impressionable, that's just how it is.
Sure.
So, look to your past trauma that you may not have processed. It could be a breakup that happened to you recently, you know, but you have to find a way to feel those uncomfortable feelings so that they can go away and process that situation, maybe understand it in a new light, understand things about yourself and how it affected you, and, really just come to terms with whatever it is. And it could be more than one thing. It could be multiple things, and, try to heal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So porn addiction real?
Yeah, it's real.
It's real, but it's not a pathology.
Well, any addiction is pathological if it's hurting you, but it's not something that I think other people. It's not like a diagnosis that I think other people should be able to apply to you forcefully and force you to get treatment for it. Right, that won't work.
Porn addiction is real, as in anything.
It's a thing.
As in many things can be an addiction. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Now, sex addiction. This was like a second part to that question. Right. Sex addiction. Would there be any difference, or do you think that what we already talked about with porn addiction applies as well to that?
So, yeah, there may be some slight differences, but everything that we said about porn addiction, I think, could easily apply to sex addiction. I would like to recommend that people check out, if they're interested in reading about this, check out Dr. Marty Klein. He writes about sex addiction, and he is a opponent of it. He doesn't believe that it's real.
Yeah. Fan of his work.
He wrote a book called The Myth of Sex Addiction, I believe. He's got articles by similar names. He writes in Psychology Today and lots of other blogs. But he basically said what I said earlier in this segment, that sex addiction has become, like, yes, it's possible to get addicted to nearly anything,
right.
But the term sex addiction has become an excuse for people cheating on their spouses or watching porn at work or whatever.
Yeah.
It has become a sin to, like, sort of shame people with, and then they can, pay penance by doing therapy or something, but it's not really going to cure them because that behavior wasn't really, sex addiction in the first place or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other disturbing thing that I've seen Marty Klein write about is that, psychologists get together and they try to come up with definitions of what constitutes sex addiction. And some of those definitions basically just amount to you're having more sex than the therapist thinks is appropriate.
Exactly.
Or you're having a different kind of sex than the therapist, like BDSM.
Right.
They might think that somebody who's into BDSM and is regularly sporting bruises because of their play parties is a sex addict, because they might think, oh, they're hurting themselves. Well, actually, no, they're just not familiar with the whole world of BDSM, and that they know exactly what they're doing. They're doing it consensually with very carefully negotiated limits and boundaries in place beforehand.
Right.
And it's just a different kind of sex than that therapist is maybe familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think all of that's great points. I mean, and this is, it comes back to, it feels like central planners are just trying to categorize fucking everybody and everything. And, the human condition defies categorization, especially to that level, of like even down to a person's sex drive. It varies for everybody. I think sex addiction, other than like anything else, like we were saying with porn, yes, you can become addicted to things. However, that doesn't mean that you have some kind of mental imbalance. That doesn't mean that it's not something that, it's not like a diagnosis. You have an addiction. It's not like sex is somehow bad, or that there's such a thing as too much sex, or that there's such a thing as, something like, or weird sex or something like that.
Those are all too much, too weird. Those are all judgments that are extremely subjective.
Right.
And really the best person to decide whether it's a problem is you.
Yeah. That comes from, again,
maybe with input from your loved ones, but it's you.
Right. Which again comes from this foundation of normalcy that is also completely subjective and made up,
right. Social norms. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
They're arbitrary.
And this is another thing. I think another big part of this too, is that I think a lot of these prescriptions, a lot of these diagnoses come from, the cultural aspect of, or the, I don't want to say notion, but it comes from monogamy. That's not an insult to monogamy, because if you want to be monogamous, you choose that. Just like if you want to have a lot of sex, you choose that. If you want to watch porn, you choose that. Okay.
You could be monogamous and still have a lot of sex, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So
they're not mutually exclusive.
Right. But my point being is that I think a lot of these are problems because somebody feels like they've been cheated on, when maybe the person just shouldn't be monogamous. Maybe that doesn't fit their bill, or
maybe they shouldn't be married.
Yeah, right. I mean, and marriage is a whole other conversation. Yeah. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Or maybe they're having other problems in their marriage that could use some attention.
Yeah. So I guess what I want to say is that porn addiction and sex addiction, in the conventional understanding of them, are not real. But yes, you can be addicted to these things. Again, like we've said multiple times, just like you can be addicted to just about anything else. So, Okay.
Yeah.
Any other points on that?
No,
Stephanie?
I like that answer. Let's move on.
All right, cool. So we can go to that article now, which I thought was interesting. And the article is women, or how sexually fluid are men and women really?
Oh.
And so they wanted to hear our thoughts on this. And it says, new research, and this is from Psychology Today, new research adds to surprising insights into both genders' heteroflexibility.
Both genders.
Da-da-da. I'll read a bit here. Over the, like as if there's only two.
There's only two. Yeah.
Let's talk about constructs. Over the past 2 decades, women's sexuality has become increasingly seen as more fluid than men's.
Yep, I've heard that.
Okay, so now I want to stop for a second. I'm sure what Psychology Today maybe means, and they're basing it upon someone else's research, not necessarily their own, is that, there's a male body and a female body, and there's even, room within all of that. Mm-hmm. But I think that's what they mean more than they mean gender.
Right. Yeah. People confuse sort of the familiar biological sexes to equate to gender a lot of the time.
They confuse sex with gender.
Yeah.
Often. So, and I think that's a case of what's happening here.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes it makes sense for research studies or just for simplicity's sake to kind of talk about the two familiar genders. But, with the awareness and acknowledgement that not everybody might fall neatly into those categories.
Exactly. So reading on, many studies have offered evidence confirming this, that women are more fluid than men. Take, for instance, a 2010 survey of college-aged women that found 84% have fantasized about same-sex encounters or have had a same-sex attraction. Then there was they also,
and the other 12% are lying. just kidding. I'm sorry. They're not lying. I don't mean to marginalize those poor straight women, but they are in the minority according to this.
Yeah. Says, see also a study by Meredith Shivers in which women participants, irrespective of what sexual orientation they identified with, became aroused in response to all types of stimuli, ranging from straight and lesbian porn to videos of copulating bonobos.
I've heard of that study before.
Sure.
Basically, women are turned on by everything except a naked man.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah, right. So going on, by contrast, men's sexuality is still often seen as less flexible. Only 51% of the aforementioned college women's male peers reported ever having a same-sex attraction or fantasy. And in Shivers' study, men who identified as straight were less likely to become aroused in response to pornography that didn't correspond with their explicitly stated preferences. Researchers haven't quite agreed on whether this is evolutionarily ingrained or whether social stigma and traditional gender-based roles shape men's expression and experience of desire. I'm going to cut in real quick here and say, it's the latter.
It's the social stigma.
Yes, it is, because men will, they're taught, like the first thing they're taught, you get toughen up, boy, and you have to,
don't be gay,
whatever
don't be sissy boy, don't be a soy boy.
Well, whatever you're getting accused of that may seem socially unacceptable, you will do whatever it takes to make sure you're not falling into that, so that is totally going to color any kind of study or research, in my opinion.
I mean, if we look at cultures historically that have been more accepting of male homosexual interactions,
of which there are plenty,
ancient Greece and Rome,
yes,
it was just generally kind of expected that every man would kind of be bisexual.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were, by all accounts.
Yep, including the manliest of men,
right,
being the Spartans of ancient Greece.
That's hot.
Hey. And I'll say quick for me, if I was in this study, have you ever been, if the question was, have you ever been attracted to a man? Yes, absolutely. And I could name them, so I would.
We talking celebrities or people you knew in real life?
Mainly celebrities, but then that's kind of talk about fluid. That's kind of a fluid thing for me because I've had the great, or what I consider the luck and good fortune of being able to meet a lot of celebrities and getting to have dinner with them. So just saying that it's a celebrity crush isn't exactly fair.
Right.
So, but I generally don't go, quote unquote, go after men. You know what I mean? That's not exactly my first choice, but I would still fall under that. Oh no. Yeah. I guess technically that would make me almost bisexual. Or that would make me bisexual. Bi-curious maybe would be the better term. I don't know. So anyway, just putting that out there.
A 1 on the Kinsey scale.
Yeah, I'm there. I don't know. Yeah, 2. I don't know. But anyway, Adding a further insight to this complicated picture is a recent study by researchers at Wayne State University and Western Illinois University who planted themselves outside bars in a, quote, Midwestern town in the United States, end quote, to recruit 51 men and 32 women for an experiment on sexual willingness. The first step of the study was determining whether interested participants were sober enough to consent to the study, that is. Sobriety was determined by a few coordination tests similar to that a campus security official gives to suspiciously intoxicated students. Think rubbing your belly while patting your head without issue. And the ability to remember the researcher's name and major after he or she stated this to the participant. After proving themselves cognizant enough, participants were shown a brief PowerPoint presentation. Boy, is there anything that'll give you a renob more than that? I mean, you know.
A PowerPoint.
Yeah, PowerPoint presentations. Like, wow, there goes my sex drive. Right out the window.
Yeah, it's not a hard drive anymore.
Yeah.
It's a floppy.
But a PowerPoint presentation depicting an attractive young man or woman alone in a bar, chatting up the bartender. 32% of males and 23% of females saw an attractive young male. 29% of males and 16% of females saw an attractive female. Some slides in the presentation had an audio component narrating a typical night out. Think, quote, you walk into a bar, you sit down at an open seat at the bar, end quote. And describing the attractive other in the photos is stating to the bartender that he or she, quote, wanted to see where the night would lead, end quote. Participants were then briefly surveyed about how likely they might be to do the following. A, buy the individual depicted in the present PowerPoint presentation a drink. B, knock back a few drinks with the person. C, go home with the man or woman. D, spend the night. And E, sleep with this individual. Then they were asked about their sexual orientation, assigned sex, male or female, age, student status, and recent consumption of alcohol. How many servings and how many recently did you last drink? Concurrent with previous research, such as a famous experiment conducted by Clark and Hatfield in 1989 that found women are markedly less willing to go to bed with strangers than men are, female research participants were overall less willing than their male counterparts to engage in any sexual activities with the fictitious person seated alone at the bar. That reluctance decreased, however, with each successive drink female participants consumed. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So what are they saying there? That alcohol lowers people's inhibition, that basically people secretly want to have one-night stands with strangers, but they know it's not a good idea, and only when their inhibitions are lifted by alcohol do they actually follow through with it?
Let me read the next paragraph.
Okay.
Not so surprising, right? In case you haven't replicated this, alcohol consumption has been proven to make us find more attractive those whom we might not swipe right on in a soberer state. What was intriguing about participants' willingness to hook up with a stranger was the difference along male and female lines. Women's interest in hooking up with the fictitious individual at the bar increased with each drink regardless of that individual's gender, despite the fact that all women in the study identified as heterosexual. So I can read on a little bit because there's only like 3 more little paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And then we can talk about it. By contrast, men's interest in hooking up with fictitious others remained stable with each drink when that fictitious other was a female. In other words, alcohol had an insignificant effect upon a male's willingness to sleep with a woman. They wanted to just as badly, regardless of their sobriety level. Men's willingness to experiment with another male sitting at the bar, however, was responsive to alcohol. Meaning, the more men in the study, the more men in the study drank, the more open they became to having some type of sexual encounter with a man. Keep in mind that, like all the women in the study, every male participant identified as heterosexual. The researchers believe that alcohol may loosen the constraints some men place on themselves that, when sober, enable them to conform to the sexual scripts they associate with traditional masculinity. Such a propensity to explore options outside the straight and narrow may also increase over time, as other research suggests. Men's attraction to same-sex partners rises with age. Interestingly, the same study observing this trend found that women's sexual interest in same-sex partners decreases with age, albeit only slightly.
Oh, that hasn't been my experience.
Nah, indeed. The takeaway of the study is that men's sexuality isn't necessarily as rigid as we all may think, nor does one's stated sexual orientation determine or fix who and what one is attracted to, especially, or at least, not when alcohol is involved.
Right.
So what do you think? Are you coming away convinced that women are more fluid, or what?
No, I mean, I think that the last study that they talked about with the PowerPoint it's just that, for women, it's not really socially acceptable to sleep with anybody in a one-night stand situation. They will be judged as slutty or inappropriate or whatever. And they may actually feel legitimate danger about putting themselves in a situation where they might be physically vulnerable, and they're usually smaller, and it's harder to fight somebody off if they needed to, and whatever. They have something that people want who are bigger than them, and that's scary. So, I get it. Alcohol lowers people's inhibitions, and so women might be more likely to do something they might start to care less about the socially acceptableness of what they want to do or what they may want to do, when they're drunk. It starts to matter a little bit less how society would perceive them and the judgments of other people. For men, it is socially acceptable to want to have one-night stands. What have they got to lose? It's like pretty much, it's a win-win for them. They get lauded.
Well, there's a social reward for a man doing it, as to where there is a social punishment for women doing it.
That's right. There's a double standard.
Yes.
And that's reflected, I think, in that data. I did find it really interesting that the men were more open to a same-sex encounter if they had a couple of drinks.
Yeah, the more they drank, the more they were open to something.
That's not socially acceptable.
Right.
So maybe that desire is always kind of there, but it needs a few drinks to come out. Speaking
anecdotally, though, I'm sure enough people would corroborate this that maybe it would fall out of anecdote. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, guys do get a lot more huggy and touchy-feely when they drink. I've experienced that many, many a time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, some people get horny when they drink, too. All sexes and genders and whatever.
But I mean, and some people get, more violent when they drink. I mean, there's a broad range of reactions. So
yeah, I have definitely had an experience where in a party situation, a woman who I thought was heterosexual and kept saying she was heterosexual, although maybe she protested too hard. I don't know.
You think she doth protest too much?
Had a couple of drinks and suddenly was interested in making out with me, who is an out bisexual. Right. Everybody knows I don't hide it that I like women. So
right on.
Well, yeah. I mean, it makes you. It makes you, I think, when you're out as a queer, it makes you a safe person to experiment with for people who are questioning or maybe bi-curious or whatever, because they know that you already are queer, and so they feel more comfortable like exploring it with you.
Yeah. I mean, my woo right on was like pride in that you're proud. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah. Not like a lascivious thing.
No.
Cool. Well, anyway, yeah, this woman who I thought was straight, and I was, just treating her in a friendly way, became interested in making out with me when she got drunk. And it was just confusing more than anything else. I felt a little bit objectified. I felt a little bit like I was sort of like a thing to experiment on that she thought she could kind of use to experiment. And I mean, not that I was complaining that much because I enjoyed the makeout. And I didn't have any expectations beyond that.
Right.
But it felt a little strange. Like, I think as an out queer person, I would rather, if I'm going to do anything with anybody, I would rather that they also be out and like have a solid sense of their identity and who they're attracted to, and not be the person that a questioning person experiments with.
Yeah, understood.
Or at least if a questioning person wants to, like, if they want to figure out their sexuality, I'm totally down to help them with that. I will talk about it all day, but don't figure it out by making out with me when you're drunk. Like, let's just talk about it when we're both sober, and maybe, I would feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things come to mind for me on this. One is, and at some point I'm going to have somebody on this show to talk about it that can really have a great, intelligent conversation about it. I don't know. And so I stay away from it. I don't know where the line of consent is when one starts drinking.
Yeah, that's another really difficult question.
Yeah, like
I usually avoid those situations too.
Yeah, I try to, unless it's somebody that I'm already a friend with, very friendly with, or something like that. Even then, like, I mean, one wants to be really cautious.
I've had a couple of situations where a significant other of mine I felt too drunk to consent to sex with me.
Right.
And so I didn't have sex with them, even though they were my girlfriend.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and the study in general, like a bar should just be an instant turnoff. In my personal opinion, a bar should be a fucking turnoff for where to find somebody that you'd want to spend any amount of time with. Okay. And I'm not saying I'm against drinking. In fact, kind of the opposite. Like I sort of understand. I mean, and the study sort of like kind of brought up some of the points. And in fact, really it might even expand on it a little bit. But like, I understand why women drink, because I get how hard society pushes so much bullshit on women.
Yeah.
And it is very hard
to get a break from it.
It's hard to get out of that shell, you know, as much as they want to, you know, perhaps.
I get that too. I mean, I get why anybody drinks because, it's like sometimes you just want a break from it all.
Yeah, I'm far more forgiving of women drinking than necessarily I am of men. However, this study is very interesting in that, suddenly men might want to get a little sexual about things once they lube up a bit, socially lube.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know, you know, I'll just say this, and I've said this before, and there's research to back it up, some of which they mentioned at the beginning of the article. I mean, yeah, I think women are more fluid, but you know, as far as sexuality goes, but I'm getting to the point where I think really everybody's fluid. Just some people, you know, are amenable to it within themselves and some aren't.
Yeah. As the culture changes, maybe we'll see a shift and it'll appear as though people are getting more fluid. I think a lot more of it is social programming than most people care to admit.
Yes.
I mean, God, just thinking about it, I mean, I think I've always been, I guess, bisexual, but growing up in a world where there were no gay characters in any of the books that I read or any of the TV shows that I watched, except maybe like Will and Grace, but that was like a very flaming, like stereotypical gay male character. There were no bisexual characters to speak of. Every Disney movie was a heterosexual love story of a prince and a princess. And the princess always looked a certain way and had a really skinny waist and big eyes and was white with like beautiful long hair and was very feminine gender expression. Like seeing that template so many times over and over, how could you possibly get through a childhood like that and think that it didn't affect you in some way? Being told over and over again, someday you're going to wear a wedding dress and you're going to walk down the aisle with your husband and your father's going to give you away. You know, like being prepared for something like a wedding, which is like this weird display of like sexual baggage, like weird gender roles and, you know, notions of marriage and monogamy. Like being prepared from that from the time you're literally like a little girl pre-puberty is just, it's crazy to think that doesn't affect you. And sometimes I think that, you know, there's like a radical feminist argument. I'm going to go way off and off the deep end here for a second. There's like a radical feminist argument that women are by nature not really inclined to be attracted to men, but they are conditioned to accept it. And they are conditioned to believe that that's the only thing that's your only option. You have to learn to like it. And, you know, there are times when I can see that argument. I'm ducking. Don't throw a rotten tomato at me. But I can really see that argument. I mean, have you ever had the experience where there was a guy that was showing interest in you and you were like, you know, he's really kind of ugly. Like he's actually kind of repulsive. But then you see things about him like he's funny or he has a good personality and you start to like him. And you're like, yeah, you know, I could get used to his physical appearance. And then you kind of warm up to it. And I mean, that's the kind of thing that I mean. It's like, would you even give him a chance if it weren't so socially enforced, really, to be with a man?
Sure. Well, I'll say this right out. And I'm not the only one that said this. And if you want to go down the list of fucking celebrities that have celebrity men who have openly come out and stated this, guys are ugly. Like in general, guys are ugly. What maybe you could fall in love with is either the mind or maybe you enjoy perhaps what his appearance hints at what he's capable of. You know, not so much like the line. I mean, guys listening to this, come on. You know, like and it's not just because we're guys, like what has better, you know, symmetry, better lines, all this different stuff that we generally use to define beauty. It ain't men.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the female feminine form.
Right. I mean, it's just not. So I don't think that statement is necessarily, well, I get it. It might be extreme. But I kind of get like the abstract notion. There's something to it,
I mean, I say this as a person who now identifies as bisexual, but had such a muddy, murky time figuring that out. Right. I remember being so many situations where I was attracted to a woman, college, high school even, and I felt so guilty, confused, ashamed, like something was wrong with me, that it really gave me a hard fucking time. And I didn't like drink alcohol then, so I didn't cope with it that way. But I coped with it in other ways, and I had to cope with it because it felt so wrong because of what I grew up learning from culture. Mm-hmm. And eventually I was not able to ignore it. It got to the point where with a specific person, it was so strong, the attraction, that I could not ignore it. And that's when I knew I had to do this work, and I had to come out, and I had to figure it out. And I listened to a lot of podcasts. I listened to a lot of bisexual and lesbian people talk about women loving women. I tried my best to normalize it, to provide the normalization that I never got growing up as a child.
Right.
And once I kind of immerse myself in that, it feels like the most natural thing in the world. And it just shows how much like the media that you consume and the culture affects your sexuality. It's kind of amazing, actually, to see how much it affects it. And this is one of the reasons that I spend so much time narrating lesbian love stories in my work, because I just think it's so important for people out there to have models, and not role models necessarily, but just to see what relationships like this can look like, to see that there are many different forms that same-sex and, non-binary and different gender relationships can take, and that they're all kind of okay, and you don't have to be limited to a specific template. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I do want to say, I mean, gay men are obviously into men. And that's a kind of attraction that is
gay
very
and bisexual men.
Yeah, and bisexual.
And pansexual, whatever.
Sure. So I mean, as far as like what makes that all work, maybe the opinions differ there, on all of that. But yeah.
Are you saying like how could gay men be into men because men aren't beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm open to hearing actually those points, feel free to message me and we could talk about it on the next Relationship Rhombus Show.
Maybe men aren't beautiful, but there is something that they have going for them if you're a gay man, which is that, you can there's the shared experience with any same-sex relationship. It's just like, usually you share the experience of growing up as that gender, being treated as that gender, which is a huge one, and all the expectations and all the baggage that goes along with it, having certain body parts, being able to relate to each other on that, having different, like certain experiences you can relate to each other on.
But none of that's really physicality. None of that is the physical body itself, right?
Well, I don't know, because I could imagine like if I was a man, like just the experience of being really driven by sex. Like I've heard a lot of men say that they just have this sex drive that sometimes it just feels like you're thirsting in the desert and you have to have it. And it's so strong.
Yep.
And I think like female-bodied people don't often experience it quite that way.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. But again, that's not like, so as an analogy, women are Lamborghinis. Okay. Like biological women are Lamborghinis. Men are F-100s or F-150s. Okay. Do you get my point? I'm saying raw physical.
Sure.
What do you? Okay.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
So a guy, even in his best look, is comparable to a truck. They even call them that. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm talking purely physical form.
Okay.
Nothing else about the person, not their mentality, not, nothing else about it. Just pure physical form. That was the point I was making earlier, is that what we generally define as graceful and beautiful and things like that are not found in the male biological form, physical form. Nothing more than their physical form. There's I think strength can be, or could be argued a beautiful thing. Like you could use the term beautiful, or at the very least can be an attractive thing. But all that's very different from describing like an actual physical form, taking it at face value at the physical form. And that's why I say women are Lamborghinis, right? I mean, the lines can be nice. There's a sleekness, there's, all these different, again, we're just talking physical form, nothing more, no other parts, counted about it. So yeah, I don't know. I recognize that I can be attracted to a guy, but it's not out of what is, a literal beauty. Like, I don't think there's a literal beauty there. It's other aspects.
Right. You need a little bit more than just the physical.
Mentality, strength, things like this that could turn me on.
Sure.
Strength can be sexy. Sexy is different from beauty.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, anyway, I was just kind of clarifying on that.
Yeah. Okay. I think I see where you're going with that. Yeah, I agree.
I'm not ripping on men because, please, I look at my own body, and I take enjoyment in it. I look at the body of other guys, I'll watch Mr. Olympia, whatever, and I take enjoyment in it. I'm not ripping on men. Don't go canceling your Patreon. Brian hates men. No. Okay. It's because I don't hate myself. All right. Give me a break.
Would you identify as a man? Do you consider yourself a man?
Yeah. Out of pure ease.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, philosophically, I'm, I not believe, I don't think it's belief. I think it's fact. I'm an ego. Everyone's an ego, an individual ego, and all this, everything else is just, whatever, biology and some other nonsense. But,
biology is a spook.
Yeah. Well, no, I'd never say that. Biology is very real, but yeah, just for simplicity's sake, sure, I'm a man.
Okay. Well, I think we covered the question, right? Which was,
what do we think about that?
Yeah, are women's sexualities more fluid than men's? Oh, yeah. One last point. The article said something about women want men more as they get older. That hasn't been my experience, and partly because, I was in the closet when I was younger and I was repressed about it. But I just find that as I get older, and especially as I've had more negative experiences of men, like with the Me Too movement and just realizing a lot of sexual harassment that happened to me and sexual trauma that happened to me done by men.
Right.
I grow less and less interested in men all the time.
Sure.
And more interested in women.
Sure. Absolutely.
Friendships, having their company around, lovers, whatever.
Right. Yeah, fair. So, and that's totally understood.
Yeah. And Brian, you're wonderful when I talk about this. You never seem to feel threatened by it, and you totally understand where I'm coming from, which is part of why you're awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, folks, I fell in love with a man. I love Brian, and I'm not going anywhere. But if I were single or whatever at this point in my life, I wouldn't be looking for a man. I'd be looking for a woman.
Yeah. Well, thanks, love. Well, and this drives me nuts. When women complain about these things, well, men do this, well, men do that. Yeah, they do. Like, what do you want? I'm not saying that to the women. I'm saying to the guys who are like, they're collectivizing. They're doing this. No, they fucking do. Like, this isn't coming out of nowhere, and you know it. And some of you even take pride in it. It just, if you don't do that, I said this on a recent Sovryn Tech. I said, look, if you're a guy that doesn't do this bullshit that the Me Too movement's against, then guess what? When they say men do this, they're not talking about you.
Yeah.
You're okay. You can just get on with your fucking life and do what you're doing. Stop being so goddamn self-interested in what everybody else, thinks about you, because what other people think about you is none of your business.
Right.
It's none of your business. You know why this stuff doesn't offend me? You know why it doesn't bother me? You know why when somebody tells me what they've experienced and what they're going through and what they think happens when they go out into the world and all that, why it's totally okay with me? Because I've got my own shit to do. Because right. I admit to my self-interestedness and I deal with it. And the people that I love, if I see that they're hurting, you better fucking believe I'm going to listen to them.
Yeah, try listening to people instead of just getting defensive and say, oh no, I'm not like that. Well, consider for a minute that what if you are?
Right.
Be open to the possibility, because if someone you care about is saying it, maybe you should listen to them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but I feel pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great.
So
that was really good.
We got all that off the chest.
Yeah.
Okay. There were a couple of other questions.
Uh-huh.
Do you have time? We're
what time is it?
It's
can we take a quick bathroom break?
We can take a bathroom break. I'm going to hit the pause button.
Okay.
And they'll never know.
They'll never know what we did during that indeterminate amount of time.
Yeah, that very paused. Right. So
the magic of radio, folks.
Woo. So anyway, let's get on to our next question. Hopefully we haven't lost everybody after talking about that. And the next question, it's actually a two-parter. And it basically, without reading a bunch of stuff to, really prop up our egos, and not like the ego that we are, not like the unique, ineffable thing that makes us, but our, more conventional egos.
The thing that gets inflated?
Yes. The person pretty much asks, how do I get a Stephanie Murphy? Now, hold on.
There's only one available.
Yeah. The other part of it is, how do I get a Brian Sovryn? And of course, what they mean is, how do they find what they think you and I, or what we do have? How do they?
How do they find a relationship like the one that we have?
Yeah.
With each
how
other?
do they find a woman like you? And I guess, how do they find a man like me?
That's an interesting question. Are you sure that they meant that, or did they mean like, how would they get with us if?
No, I'm 100% certain they didn't mean how to get with us.
Okay, good.
Because that would not make it. That would not make it on this show. So,
right. I'm not going to give people an instruction manual.
Yeah. Though I'll tell you, I'll just put this out there. If you don't like Star Trek, or you can't even really talk it, we got nothing. So,
well,
in my book.
Okay, that may apply to you. It doesn't necessarily apply to me. But I do like to talk about Star Trek.
Yes.
One of my interests.
We watch it every week.
Oh, boy. Okay, so I guess, where do people like us hang out? We put ourselves out there on the internet.
That's the crazy thing. We met at a place we'd never hang out.
Well, we physically met at a place where we wouldn't hang out. True, but the initial introduction was on the internet because I was putting myself out there on the internet by my podcast.
Yes, which is wholly different from social media.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think people like us who have a lot to say and have ideas and stuff will put themselves out there on the internet in some form, even if they're really introverted. Like, we are pretty introverted. Like, yes. I don't really post much on social media.
Right.
But I do love podcasting as an art form and as a medium of communication.
Yeah.
And I pour a lot of my heart out into it,
Right.
There's certain things that are too personal that I don't talk about on podcasts and whatever, and I don't share. But I do put a lot of myself out there to the point where I think I attract people who are feeling what I'm putting out,
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. I mean, I guess
it's a siren song almost.
It's not a siren song. It's not like luring people to a false thing that.
Well, it's not false. That's why I say
deliver.
Almost.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's kind of an analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, when you put yourself out there on the internet, like attracts like, right? So, I mean, if you have something to say, you should put yourself out there on the internet, and you might be surprised at who you would meet. Like friends too.
Sure.
I mean, made a lot of great friends that way as well.
Yeah. Boy, like, obviously you're not, I don't know. I don't know anybody else quite like me. We're all individuals, of course. But even then, in fact, somebody recently I know said on Twitter, very gracious, actually somebody who's a patron of this show, he very graciously stated that you want to listen to real individuals. There's like 5 people, I think, on the list. Myself, you were on that list, and MK Lords is on that list. I think another patron, actually, Jim Jesus of the Lulberts, he was on that list. And they said those are individuals.
Oh,
meaning
that's very
that,
nice.
Sure, everybody's an individual, but then there's people who are like, okay, no, they're fucking different. And so I'm not saying, I don't even have to say it about myself. You can go to this guy's tweet, to put that together. So yeah, I like how to find me. Where would I be? If you're looking for a Brian Sovryn, honestly, if I were single and alone, you'd find me at a science fiction convention. That's about where you would find me. I don't think you'd find me at a bookstore. I don't, there's very few other places I could imagine where like I would be there for a long period of time where you could even experience, the person that I am. So in the abstract, I'm not saying, I guess maybe maybe I'm being too literal in my answering of the question. But if you were looking for a Brian Sovryn, that's where you'd find me. You'd find me amongst the geeks.
Yeah, I think my answer is kind of similar to that. Like if I were looking, I would probably, you might meet me at a professional kind of thing, which presents a problem because I'm not saying hit on people at work events, but like, I don't know, like maybe I would go to a conference about something that I was interested in, like voiceover or like Bitcoin or something like that. I did go to a lot of Bitcoin conferences, wasn't single at the time, but you know, like I like to participate in things that I'm interested in, and I like to see intellectually stimulating talks and things like that. So maybe a conference environment would be good because it is sort of like casual, but also can be professional or intellectually stimulating in a certain way too.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't
hang out there.
Right. You wouldn't find me, not really. You wouldn't find me. And I mean this with no offense to the events. And I'm serious about that. You wouldn't find me at Porkfest. Like, that's not where you're going to find me, me in my element.
Well, you wouldn't find me or Brian at a bar.
No.
So there's that.
Yeah. Do not look in a bar. That is not where you're going to find, it's if you, and I know the amount of places where you can do this are shrinking by the day.
Yeah.
But
it's tough. But the internet isn't, and it's still there. Podcast.
I don't know. I know. But
I know you have problems with social media, but I never used social media to meet partners. Really, it was more like my podcast. And I wasn't using my podcast to meet partners either.
No, right.
I just put myself out there, and I ended up attracting people who became friends and a partner, which is you.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, that's how I encountered you was through your podcast. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the other place where you'd find me is on my show. You know, obviously.
And we're both so serious and passionate about what we do that if someone takes an interest in it, we really feel like we're being seen and understood.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big part of who we are and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But that part of it makes it tough because like it can be hard for me in that, like, say somebody was like attracted to me, right? Because of my show. They know me, and we've mentioned this before, but there's a little bit of an angle to this that might not have been said before. They know me they know me, like, because I put myself out there. You know what I mean? I don't know them. Here's the problem. That can become a very boring situation for me because all I can do is ask you questions.
Right. It feels one-sided.
Yeah, but you already know everything about me. And if anything, I'll often feel like an ass because I'll talk about me, but you already know that. And I'll be like, well, you listen to the show, you know that,
Yeah.
And I'll feel like an idiot.
Awkward social situations.
Yeah. So that's a tough way to find a person or at least understand that. Like if you were really going, if you're really interested in actually getting with somebody who's a podcaster or something, like, know that you could end up having a very lopsided conversation that would not allow the relationship to develop, friendship or otherwise, would not allow it to develop in the natural course that most romantic relationships or, like I said, friendship, whatever, would normally go.
Sure.
That can make it very difficult.
You can end up idealizing someone too if you just hear them on the radio.
Yeah, that can happen.
You can think of them as almost like a celebrity, or you build this image of them up in your mind, but really they're just a person.
Yeah. I mean, because I can be, I am usually, like way more somber than I am on my show. Like I don't normally just yell at people, not normally. Yeah. And yeah.
You might also meet a person like us through a friend of a friend.
Yep.
Right? Like we don't tend to go out looking for new friends, but the friends that we already have, we will hang out with them. And if they introduce us to someone, we usually take it seriously because we respect our friend's opinion.
Well, that's a huge thing too. Okay. And this is a very important point, is that like when I want to call somebody a friend, like really call them a friend, and I want to invite them into my home and all that, I don't mean to put any kind of expectations on people, but like I'm putting a lot of trust in that person.
Yeah.
Like that is not,
it takes a while for both of us to open up to somebody, I think.
Yeah. That is not a simple thing. That is not a term I throw around. That is not some, I mean, like,
oh yeah.
Like really,
I think both you and I take the term friend and love like very seriously.
Yeah. So if you like, if I am putting stock in what a friend says about another person, understand, friend, that like I'm really trusting you, and I'm going to take the distance, you know. So yeah. I mean, again, I don't mean to put any like unwarranted expectations on people that would be friends, but you know, just know that like I don't throw around that term, you know, and I don't have many. I don't have many friends, and that's very much by choice.
That's right.
Because,
I don't think I have. I mean, I feel lucky at the people that I have access to, but yeah, I feel like, you know, my friends are, you know, it's quality over quantity.
Yes, I am super, super particular, and I won't bend, you know, on it. I don't need to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We don't want to just fill our lives up with friends that aren't really very good, you know.
No. I mean, I have a huge heart. I can love, you know, like, you know, many people and everything, but I choose to have a very, you know, because when I really care, like I care, you know, and it's all in.
Yeah. So. Speaking of that, like I think Brian, you and I are both similar. We have the same Myers-Briggs type.
Yes. INTJs.
It takes us a while to open up to people, and it took us a while to open up to each other. And we got to know each other as friends for, you know, nearly a couple of years before we started anything romantic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like even the first time that I remember really opening up to you, I asked you, I was like, look, can we just like go outside for a minute? Cause like, I didn't want to open up to everybody that was around us.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to do it in private. And when I opened up, I opened up.
Oh, I know. You know? I'm glad you did. Cause yeah, we're both like that. We're both kind of like almost paranoid at times about sharing information. It's hard to get us to, we don't tend to share stuff unless we're asked directly about it.
Right.
You know, like we don't just volunteer information about how we're feeling or what we're doing or whatever. Like we wait for people to ask us. And that can be a communication challenge sometimes because we almost do it with each other once in a while. But I always make an effort to like ask you, hey, well, what do you mean by that? Or like, what are you thinking about right now? Or what are you feeling? Or, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of reminded of all ironies. I'm kind of reminded of a Star Trek comic, one of my favorites, the Marvel did back in like 98, where they did a sequel to the original series episode Mirror Mirror. And it was in the Mirror universe, which is all the rage right now in Star Trek Discovery. Spoiler alerts. Woo! But anyway, in this comic book, there's a point where Spock like is getting it, is going, you know, like is starting to build up this relationship with a woman on board. And this is, you know, Mirror Spock. And he makes this comment where, you know, he said, you need to be patient with us Vulcans, but we assure you that, you know, the results are most rewarding. And I think that's kind of a thing, is that like, if you're looking for a Brian Sovryn or a Stephanie Murphy, you need to be patient and you need to be curious.
Yes. And, I love that. And the results will be most rewarding.
And believe me, be patient.
Yeah.
Take that time and concentrate on that person.
It's so worth it.
And as soon as the floodgates open, the feeling is, well, I know how I felt with you, Stephanie. And like, wow. Like that is, and I don't mean this in cliche. It was a love that because everybody says this, but I mean it. It was a love I literally could not possibly know existed. But you have to be patient. You can't be like, hey, you know, do you want to get jiggy tonight? I don't know, whatever the fuck people want to say today. Do you want to Netflix and chill tonight?
Will Smith is the only one who would say that.
Like within the first month, you can't just start saying, well, hey, you know, let's do this, let's do that, you know.
I think that's a problem that a lot of people see with relationships today, is that like there don't seem to be many people who are really willing to invest the effort to get to know somebody. They want like instant gratification or instant results or something like that. And there's kind of no substitute for really getting to know a person and being patient and focusing on them. And, you know,
and if I'm interested, like it may not show, like I read people very quickly. And if I'm interested, like if you go running off with somebody else, you know, I'll ruminate on you. You know what I mean? If I'm really interested, it'll just happen, by nature, because like I'll feel that, I hate to use this term, but I feel that connection, right? But if you go running off during that first couple months or something with somebody else, I'm going to forget. I'm going to be like, oh, well, they're with that person, and I'll leave you alone, because I'm a big believer in leaving people the fuck alone, and minding my own business. So that's something too. Like that's part of that patience, be patient with the person.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
I like that. I think we answered that question pretty well.
Yeah, actually, I think
there's no magic formula. Like,
no,
obviously, we can't
everybody's an
put
individual.
into a box, and there's nobody like just like us. But I think those are pretty good. Like, I think there's some good self-awareness there on both of our parts.
Sure,
about where you might meet a person like us and how you might get to know them for a relationship.
Be patient. Be curious. I think that's a great way to, even if you think you know everything about the person, ask questions.
And by all means, if they tell you that they're not interested or they show you with their actions,
pay attention.
Although, like, people like us can be a little bit aloof, I guess, sometimes. Like, we're not the best at keeping in touch because we don't need those friends. We can kind of take them or leave them.
Yeah.
So we can be a little bit non-responsive or hard to get in touch with or seemingly aloof. But if we're really interested, you'll know, because we'll ask you questions and we will reply back and we'll see you and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, there was one more question, and I don't know if we want to do that, if you want to look at the time.
Sure, why not? I think I'm up for it.
This one's kind of more directed at me. So, and the question that I boiled it down to pretty much is that they said that I had mentioned sex magic in the past, and I may had hinted that I practice it, and they asked very explicitly, do I practice sex magic?
Speaking of you not opening up unless you're asked a direct question.
Yeah.
Boy, that was pretty direct.
Well, there is a direct question.
So, Brian, is it true? Are the rumors true? Do you practice sex magic?
Okay, let me dodge
Crowley.
let me dodge the question, in that I don't believe in any kind of mysticism, supernaturalism, or spirituality at all. So I don't believe in any of that. So if that, I think kind of answers the question in a way. But that said, I may on occasion dabble in the dark arts, in the occult.
What are we talking here? Like cutting up a chicken and swinging it around your head?
So sex magic boiled down generally rounds up to you can use sigils, which sigils, depending if you're talking about like chaos magic, sigils are where you write down what you want and then you mix it up into like all the letters of what that is, and usually what you're wanting to achieve through sex magic. It's almost like the law of attraction. It could be seen as that, which I think the law of attraction is pure bullshit. I don't consider it that, but I can get where people would interpret it as such. But you mix up all these letters and then it takes a shape, and that is your sigil, and you should concentrate on that. But there's a lot more to it. Like there's a lot to describe, because you're supposed to kind of like lust to forget. I think that's the phrase that people that practice sex magic engage in, which is you think about it when you're masturbating or fucking or whatever, but then you need to let it go after the fact, and you don't think about it, and you just kind of let it
marinate in your unconscious. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Which is what I think, in my opinion. So, all right. So let me explain this quickly. I think that a lot of what gets described as black magic, the occult and other things historically is actually science. And there's a lot of evidence for that. Like, I mean, there's times where it's just bullshit. But then there's other times where you can look at historical, documents and information and everything, and you can paint a pretty clear picture that maybe it was the church trying to shut down some truth.
Well, the church was kind of equally against both science and black magic,
right?
In a way.
Well, and I think
Wiccans and pagans were kind of pagans and Wiccans are in tune with the natural world.
Right.
And what is science except measuring and quantifying and observing the natural world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I think that there's a lot of times where when somebody's pointing a finger at the occult or pointing a finger at black magic or things like this, it's not magic. It's not any kind of supernaturalism. It's just science, or it's just a different way of living. Like, I think witches historically were just women who finally said, that's a fucking enough. I'm going to go enjoy my life.
I agree with that. I totally
and,
agree.
Yeah. And sadly, they got burned at the stake for wanting to indulge in their passions and desires.
For going against the system and not being subjugated. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there are a lot of strange terms that mean very different things than what people realize that they mean. So because of that, and I've had that understanding, I don't think it's a belief. I've had that understanding, that historical, factual understanding for a long time. And because of that, I've always been interested in the occult, in alchemy, in things like this, because I think there's something there. Not what is conventionally thought about, but I think that there's something there. And so I've messed with these things at times, I've never had a sigil in the bedroom or anything like that. I mean, you can attest to that, Stephanie. And you're like supposed to come on them and everything.
I've never seen one, but
well, all right.
How would I know?
Yeah, actually, I don't want to.
No, you can't tell me.
I can't.
Don't reveal it.
Yeah, actually, that's another part of it, is that you can't tell. You're not supposed to tell people the intent. Like, I mean, it's supposed to be it's supposed to be a secret thing.
Yeah.
So, what I was going to say earlier, it boils down to like you're thinking about what you want, and what you want should be something that's just out of reach. You shouldn't be like, when you're about to orgasm, when you're at that point where no matter what happens, you're going to come. That's when you're supposed to think about what you're going for here with the sex magic. You're not supposed to think, I need $1 million. It's not going to happen. Like that's not, I mean, even if I was a believer in sex magic,
that gives a whole new meaning to the phrase money shot.
Right. Yeah. That's the money shot right there, but it doesn't work that way. But I mean, I'll just say that, just to see, just out of genuine scientific curiosity. Sure. I've practiced, that would be the term, to use, and saw what happened. And that's that. So,
right. I mean, how far do we go with this? Is yoga, when they say at the beginning of a yoga class, like, okay, set your intention or think of somebody you love or whatever, is that dark arts? Is that sex magic?
For a lot of Christians, yes.
Yeah.
That is exactly what they define it as.
Right.
Not all, but many. They do. And even you've hinted at this, where it seems like yoga, some yogic principles seem wildly advanced, that they just couldn't have known what was going on, but it was just simply observation and who knows what else. The Ayurvedic medicine is the thing that really gets me. Some of the stuff is just amazingly accurate. Yeah, I mean, their explanation of it, that it's some kind of supernatural, comes from this god or something like that, or goddess. That's nonsense. I don't see any gods and goddesses in Ayurveda. I mean, in yoga, there's myths about gods and goddesses, right. But the yoga and Ayurveda are separate. Right. But my point being is that, sure, there's things they attribute it to. It doesn't mean that the actual end effect isn't true. It's just that what they're attributing it to isn't so. It's just science, and just science that they didn't grasp, fully, or something like that. Right. So I think to a lot of maybe what people experience as sex magic, where it works, and you'd be shocked how many people actually kind of believe in this sort of thing. I think a lot of it comes down to very unconscious and intentionality that ends up bringing whatever they're thinking about maybe to fruition. The unconscious mind is so powerful. It is. People discount it, but it's so powerful. I mean, if you doubt that statement, just look at all the things that we are driven to do because of unconscious motivations that we don't understand and that we're not really aware of. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the example I often give not for sex magic, but just for unconscious intentionality, or, I mean, and you can make it conscious too, I suppose, is that if you, say you invite people over, or I don't know, you're visiting people or something like that, and when you go to sleep, you take up the entire bed. you're sending out an unconscious signal that you want to be single. You know what I mean? Or that you're taken or something like that. As to where I think if you sleep like on one side of the bed, or here's a better example. Let's forget about the bed part. If you're like at your house, okay, say you have a significantly sized driveway. Mm-hmm. If you park your car in the middle of the driveway that could easily fit 2 cars, I think you're sending out an unconscious signal that you don't want somebody else in your house, and you don't want anybody else in your life. Mm-hmm. As to where if you park to one side, there's an opening and people may see that opening, and
or you might be sending a message to yourself as well every time you see it.
Yeah, right.
Just to affirm that you are or are not like making space in your life for somebody else. Yeah.
So there's no woo-woo there. There's no spirituality. There's no supernaturalism there. It's just that it's this kind of, unconscious signal perhaps, that's there, and it may mean nothing, but you don't realize that it's nothing. But like you said, Stephanie, the unconscious mind is so powerful that you do things you don't even realize, and you send signals, I think.
You send messages to yourself, messages
to yourself and maybe even to, other people that they may pick up on unconsciously or consciously. Mm-hmm. And, and you go from there.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what people mean when they say like, oh, you're putting some energy out into the universe.
Right.
Well, it's like energy and universe, that sounds woo, but like sending a message to yourself that you could see with your eyes, that doesn't sound very woo.
Yeah.
Or sending a message to somebody else that they could observe with their eyes, that's not woo either.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's a long way of saying that there are a lot of things that are considered occult, that are considered magic, that are considered alchemist or something like that, I've messed with out of pure curiosity. And again, I am a 7 as far as atheists go. There's no supernaturalism. There's none of that. I don't believe in a stitch, of anything along those lines. But my curiosity, and it's almost like role playing. Sometimes it's fun. So
gotta have fun in life, But
I think some of these
do some
things,
sex magic,
do
some pagan rituals.
Yeah. I mean, some of these things, like there had to be a little something to it. And I don't know what that is. I'd like to know. And I like to find out. And that's part of the times why, I think about it or study it or, read about it. When I say study it, I mean, I read about it. And I see what's there. And maybe what was the truth of it. So there we go.
Good question. I don't think they expected such a deep response.
No, probably not. So, and I think I guess I admitted that okay. Enough of that. Let's wrap this up.
All right. Well, that was a fun relationship rhombus.
It was.
Where can people send their questions for the next one?
Right on Patreon. There's a private messenger that you could send them that way, or you can wait for, and I usually do it like on the 1st or 2nd of the following month. I will put out a post saying, hey, we're going to record a Relationship Rhombus show. Get in your questions here. And if a lot of questions get in quickly, I do the show earlier in the month than I normally plan. So that's where you can get them in. You can get them on the posts as they come out on Patreon, or you can message me on Patreon. You can ask them, I guess, to me on Twitter or something. I still have like accounts in all these places, but and you can ask them there.
It's easier if it's kept all organized on Patreon.
It makes my life easier and allows me to do more content if I don't have to be in so many fucking places at once that I don't think actually help at all. To be in those places. So,
well, I, as a Sovryn Tech co-host, will be so happy to join you on the next one.
Yes.
I love these relationship shows. There's nothing I love more than doing relationship advice podcasts. That's what I started out doing in podcasting.
Sure.
And it launched a whole career.
Absolutely. A beautiful career. So yeah, you'll be here next time, of course. And they can ask you the questions too, and then they can get to me through that way. But there it is. More content like every day up until the end of January. I think there's going to be an episode of some kind coming out because I have monthly obligations that I promise patrons will be there. And so I'm going to make them there. And that's it. So Stephanie, of course, always wonderful to do a show with you. I'm not going to say thanks for being on anymore because you're a co-host.
Oh yeah.
So
it's almost my show.
Yeah, exactly. You're here now. Right. And if people do want to find you, smvoice.info is
sexandsciencehour.com. Find me on Sovryn Tech as well.
Yeah, there it is.
My other show.
Woo! So, anyway, hope everybody found it interesting. And
that was so much fun.
I'll see all of you on the other side.
Woo!